Hi, girls and boys. Did you know that music has been an important part of Egyptian culture for thousands of years? In fact, they had in ancient days the god of music who invented music, and it was supposed to civilize the world. You see ancient pictures of people playing harps and flutes and goblet-shaped drums. Egyptian folk music still uses many of the same rhythms and instruments as it did a long time ago.
Bus 327 is here. Bus 327.
Well, people are obviously leaving school, but I want you to hear a story about an American man named John Jacobson who's going to tell you about his experience in Egypt. He rode a camel when he went there.
A very funny creature is a camel. Odd as almost any other mammal. When you're riding on his hump, hold on tight or every bump, for a camel is a mammal that will trample. I saw Egypt from the top of a camel. Well, at least I saw part of Egypt from the top of a camel, and it's the very best way to do so. But I have to tell you that a camel is an animal that has a mind of its own. At least the one that I rode did. It didn't matter if I wanted to go left to see a pyramid or right to see a sand dune. My camel went wherever and whenever it pleased, and I hung on for dear life. Mine was a single-humped camel, which technically makes him a dromedary. A two-humped camel is called a Bactrian camel, but one lump was plenty for me. The top of a full-grown camel is about 7 feet off the ground. So when you sit up there, it's a long way to the Sahara, 7 feet to be exact. And that's where I sat to see Egypt. My camel's name was Mustafa. I have no idea why. I didn't ask him. I called him Sir. Remember, he held me 7 feet off the ground. Once I got the hang of it, Mustafa gave me a wonderful tour of Egypt. We wandered about the pyramids of Giza. We climbed up Mount Sinai in the middle of the night in order to see the sunrise. And we galloped over the sand dunes when Mustafa felt he had had enough and it was time to return to camp. Mustafa and I became friends, yet he never writes. One of the most amazing things about Egypt is that it is a very old civilization. People have been living there for 40,000 years. The reason people have been able to live there for so long is that it is one of the most fertile lands of the entire Mediterranean region. So people had food to eat and water to drink. Of course, with food and water, there came to be more and more people. And so they had to get organized so that everyone would be taken care of. So they divided themselves up into two kingdoms, the lower and the upper. Eventually, these two kingdoms got together and had one king they called Pharaoh. I learned this while riding on Mustafa's hump. But not everybody lived in one place like people in our country usually do. Many of them were nomads, meaning they wandered around hunting and gathering, letting their animals graze, and setting up their tents wherever there was grass for their animals. This sounds old-fashioned, doesn't it? But let me tell you about something I saw in Egypt. We left the pyramids and the wonders of the Nile, and we're heading across the desert. We were hundreds of miles from anything other than sand. It was beautiful, but somewhat frightening in that there was no water or anything green for as far as your eyes could see. I knew we would be okay because we had a guide who would be delivering us food, water, and tents later on in the day in a jeep. I thought, no one would possibly survive out here without a guide with supplies. Then, as Mustafa and I plodded to the top of a sand dune and looked out across the desert, we saw a long line of camels, some with riders and some with walkers along their sides, wrapped in clothes from head to toe. These were not tourists like me, riding a one-hump dromedary for fun. These were modern-day nomads, wandering across the desert in search of food and water for their animals and themselves, just as their ancestors had done for thousands of years. They didn't always have camels, but as long as anyone can remember, there have been wandering nomads in Egypt and in many other places of the world. As I watched them go, I thought, It must be a tough life indeed. But as Mustafa turned around to head back home, because he wanted to, I thought, to be a wanderer is not all bad. To go for a walk and see something new. To board a plane for far-off lands. To explore new worlds on a bike, in a boat, on a train, or on the back of a camel is something wonderful we can all choose to do. The greatest civilizations have arisen from those who went exploring and found something new over every beautiful hill or dune. Going is important. Wandering can be wonderful. When I get home, I think I'll get myself a camel, keep wandering this big, beautiful world, and see what else I can see.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that story from a person who's actually been to Egypt. The music in Egypt sounds a little different from what we call Western music. Usually we hear a scale that sounds happy, like a major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. A song that I've been singing this week that sounds happy is Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. Well, the scale that they use in Egypt, this sort of Egyptian scale, has this da-da-dee-da-dee-da-da. Some people said it sounded like a snake charmer sound. Well, we have a song called Wandering, and repeat after me. Every day's a wonder when I wander. Every day's a wonder when I wander. You can play this video a couple times if you want to sing it with me, or just listen or enjoy it and relax, because one of my students mentioned that it sounded very relaxing. Let's see. And here we go. I'm getting right to it.
Forest or a stream, a valley for a king, a river blue.
did you hear any interesting sounding drums or flutes? Well, like I said last week, all around the world, you've got drums and flutes and string instruments. Although they've got different shapes and a little bit different sounds and even different names for those kinds of instruments. And in Egypt, a very famous granddaddy of the guitar is called an oud, O-U-D. And it does not have frets, but it's got the neck and the big sounding, beautiful almond-shaped box to it. So maybe you heard some string instruments as well. When you listen to Nami Nami, which is a link that you will be provided, get out a scarf or a piece of cloth and make it snake around like the song Nami Nami, which is actually a lullaby. And you sing lullabies to a baby or a child to help them go to sleep. In performance, I don't think it's going to make you go to sleep though. But look for the oud, look for the flute, look for the string instruments, and maybe drums as well.